So it has both the pro-social and anti-social use cases, which we enumerate. And kind of the goal of the paper is just to make everybody aware that you can now do these private ownership transfers, that you should no longer make that single entity address ownership assumption that you probably could have made in the past. And we had to measure any like actual use of encumbrance in the wild so far, so we don't. Some of it could be completely hidden though. But we kind of just want this paper to be kind of like a warning a little bit, so that everyone is aware of the potential for these private ownership transfers, so that when it does actually happen, which we think will happen eventually, ECs are just being used everywhere now. That everyone's prepared for.
Awesome. You have
We don't have to pass it about like this. This is too inconvenient. I think the focus is on the especially.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you have cases where you think, like, if I make that assumption that there's a single entity balls in the key, what ends up breaking in a world where this is possible and you make the wrong assumption?
Okay. Well, it's not like a typical. Yeah, sure. It's not like a typical vulnerability, say. So it's more like a widespread. The assumption's kind of like in how we interpret and action on things that happen on blockchain. So let's say, for example, that you have some owner of the smart contract that can control base critical decisions in the smart contract. Like, hey, it's a topping priorities for them. Now, it might appear that that owner has been constant, like, since the beginning of the creation of the building, but maybe secretly hands have changed, and it looks like it's the same person that you trusted to begin with. Now it's somebody else, and this could be an example of a antisocial ownership change that would undermine your assumption that the owner was that person you trusted to begin with, but it's actually now someone else. And publicly, it looks like it still remains the same as before.
I think maybe to add on to that, I mean, everyone has heard of the saying, not your keys, not your crypto, right? So the not your keys, not your crypto basically assumes that if you're the one controlling your secret key, no one can like take that away from you. And that basically your crypto is always going to be controlled by someone that knows the actual keys. Basically, liquefaction breaks this assumption. Liquefaction basically says, sure, you might not know the key. It might be someone else's like keys, or in this case, keys locked inside of a TE, but you still have access to that crypto. So the person who has access to the crypto is not necessarily the person that has access to the actual keys themselves. That's kind of the overall assumption that liquefaction tries to break. And James talked about a lot of the examples where this design philosophy is at play. So whether that's in, for example, whitelist and blacklist for airdrops, you assume that like someone has, if I, for example, was like a early testnet user and got a bunch of tokens in my accounts, you assume that I am still the same person that has access to that account. But you can actually trade that using like a system like liquefaction to other people. You also have things like loyalty points. You have things like governance. You can break soulbound tokens. So there's a whole host of applications that are built on this design philosophy that was a bunch of breaks, which is why this is such an important concept for us to discuss.
Do you think that this is already being used currently, just like coincidence? The MEV existed before, but it wasn't sort of formalized until Flashbots or Google came out these tools. Like, do you think this is already using like whole day?
We don't think so yet, but we show how easy it is. It's really just writing these smart contracts and running it on the TE blockchain. Like, it's that simple. So because it's so simple, we just want everyone to be able to aware of it before I move. Yeah, we haven't measured query. Like, we haven't heard reports of this sort of thing happening besides our demo attributions.
Thank you. Oh, so that is any way to prevent the liquefactions? So like I can never like I can say a stream that like if I am break, like I see some address and only one person's there behind that their address.
Yeah. So yeah, we have something called complete knowledge, which is paper that we published before we were founded the faction. And essentially, a proof of complete knowledge is a proof that your key has been leaked to some entity, like, and it couldn't have been encumbered in T. And because if the key gets leaked, then you leak it to yourself, for example, then you have full control of that key. And if you try to do some agreement with somebody else, you could always undermine that agreement by signing something that would conflict with the policy that your counterparty wanted to have it be. So, for example, let's say you Pride Key sold some of your tokens to someone else. Well, if you had the key, you would spend those tokens regardless of whatever policy was, because you have to. So for applications that you don't want to interact with encumbered accounts, or if you want to prove to someone that you have full knowledge of your key, you could use the complete knowledge to show that. It was hidden.
Smart booty first. Can you walk through how you do private ownership transfer?
Yeah, so it's fairly simple. The key is generated in a trusted execution environment, and the T application that controls that key also controls policy over what messages can be signed. And so now you have a situation where, let's say Alice is like the so-called owner of that key. Alice can authenticate to the T using some other key, not the one that she doesn't even know it's in there. And then the team will spit out signatures for message signing requests that she has. But what she could do is she can transfer ownership of the ability to sign those messages to Bob exclusively. So now she no longer has access. And so now Bob could potentially sign those transfer transactions wherever he wants to send money. So the reason it's a private ownership transfer is there's no on-chain transaction that's required for Alice to infer this to Bob, because it's the T that's controlling ownership. So it's through this off-chain protocol. We're using a T-based blockchain as ours, and you can do this transfer without needing an on-chain transaction publicly showing the ownership page.
Could I just ask a use-based question? What's like actually, can we go to him first? Just start to the sorry, no, I'm gonna go with you first. So a little bit the idea is so was you like curious? So it's basically before I have the secret key that I control my bit. So right now design is basically I can secret key that's counted as T, and they use the T as a delegate to your edge. Look, that's what it does.
So yeah, you did think of it as you don't have the key, but the key was generated in the T, and there's some ownership access control system that enforces usage of that key, and through that you can do ownership changes or delegate particular actions that the key could do to someone else.
So before it's possible, like if I steal a secret key and I go to so but now I can store a secret key that's to communicate with the T, I can still use.
Yeah, so if you steal that key that Alice is using to authenticate to her encumbered account, you can still steal that, and then but if Alice had sent a portion of her account, like you could think of it as maybe all of her or half of her ether to Bob through that. Now her authentication key only controls half of the ether, so you'd only be able to steal that. Yeah, the same problems with like key theft would still apply to Whitepaction through this authentication. Yeah.
Well, let's go to Simon. I just had a fractal question. Can ownership be transferred for a certain amount, 200 blocks, and then automatically revert?
Yeah. So actually, we've implemented we call it a time asset segmentation. So we basically split up the message space that you're using to sign stuff into different assets. So for example, maybe you have a policy that will only let you spend DAI in your account, or some other policy that will only let you spend your Bored Ape NFT. And then we had an expiration time attached to all these policies. Now, theoretically, it could be really long, like 100 years, but you could also have it be relatively short. But the one thing that you would have to be concerned about is when you're defining these policies is that once you request a signature, you could hold on to that signature forever. And so if you, for example, pre-sign, that's what we call it, pre-sign that a transaction and just hold on to it, you could release that and broadcast that transaction after the policy has expired. And so you have to be kind of careful when you're writing policies to just be aware of the fact that re-signing attacks can happen. And generally, when we write policies, if you are able to sign a transaction, we kind of assume that you are doing that at some points. And that protects against re-signing attacks interfering with the policies. Yeah?
Let's go you. I'll get out. Sure. So we did that. I think it's a super interesting concept. There's something that was just wants to get your feedback. Yes. Would you rather focus on the attack vector that it creates to the current blockchain system, like the one you mentioned about having Drake in the ownership side or so, NFT exclusivity, or the attack on-chain off-chain identity, assuming that the private key is all a person remain of that person forever, so? Or would you rather focus on the what the primitive enables further itself in terms of new things that can be done? Right? And I'm asking this because I has common natural. I really like the big case there was the first option where it just shown that yes, there is this new day that is this create this problem and is a threat. But here you can take two pathways into create the community polarity to the larger academic market. So it's just curious. How are you focusing your time? It's not persons.
To use it for good or you.
So clearly, it's a dual-use technology, and you do want to emphasize that we certainly want to be transparent about the bad things you can do with it, because some of them are unexpected. But for the future of our work is focused on the pro-social applications, and those do require us to strengthen the assumptions, but the CEs have appropriate, and so we are working on making it more secure. But I guess an example of one of the things we'd like to see was a fully trustworthy centralized exchange, basically a decentralized centralized exchange. That's something we'd like to develop because Liquefaction operates at the walled level, so you not have access to any chain basically, because you could sign messages that interact with any blockchain, and so we're thinking about how to develop its use in that. So we're focused on the pro-social applications going forward.
Because just you can be the next stage where it's untraceable who the processor we do it.
Well, I mean, yeah, true. If you create a user with that abstraction, although, I think there are probably other better Mixer designs than using Liquefaction directly, but it's not really something we're looking into. But it's possible for you. Cool.
Okay. So I guess the question will be for if I'm a developer wants to use it, or this doing designs it, then where would I implement with the policies? Is it on the blockchain? Is it on the TE environment? How do I enforce if it's certain TE? Then how is it enforced that is ran correctly? And then what is being ran inside TE?
Yeah. So for really, you just need a live TE in order to, of course, because we now have multiple parties that want to control the same account. And so the key needs to be available for all the parties whenever they want to use it. So for our implementation, we ended up using a TED-based blockchain called Oasis Sapphire in order to give us the liveness and the TE parties. So that is something that it remains land. But we also cover in the actual paper what you could do in case the TE-based blockchain went down, so how you could recover the keys. But the way the policies are implemented are, with that blockchain, it's an EVM-based blockchain. So we just have to implement them as smart contracts. And if you want to sign a message, you basically do end up by an encrypted off-chain call into the smart contract. And the storage is private, so it can sign a message and then spell sign a message through that encrypted channel.
So the legitimacy of the execution in the TE is insecure by that TE blockchain. By the blockchain, and then smart contract also has to be written correctly, and the TE is the one that ensures the privacy.
The privacy and integrity, right?
But I mean, if you did want to, you can also fill the system ground up. If, for example, you have a single little piece of like hardware that you trust yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's very possible to actually build this, or at least a variant of the system on the ground up, where it's like all you need to do, you activate a TDD, basically create a secret key inside of it, and then you introduce an access policy, and then you basically just have that sort of system good to go. So it's possible to create instances of liquefaction-like things that are not just based on the existing system on the lazy file we introduce, but there's a lot of like considerations that you have to think about. So there's like about the block have variables, you have to have like nonce management, all those sort of things, which were actually part of like the originals inside diffused here.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's like a spectrum of trust. Depending on the application, you just choose which spectrum you want in your box.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. What do you do? I prefer the feast.
Come into the circle.
Yeah. So Tibikaku, we say one thing, what do you think about stateless versus stateful keys? Because equity is stateless without persistent storage. You used to basically use the policies and verticate materials per shut down similares. While can never do while it stays will resist the storage in the symmetric key and somebody it's always some key outside the T can be JPEGs of KMS but for something else. But in this case, two owns the symmetric key of that enables the stateless can potentially reach the everything that is needed to understand the bodies even a standard transaction. So I was wondering if that for you. So
Oh, that's a big question. I haven't built that much into stateless TEs. We were more like kind of the focus behavior was to demonstrate what is possible. We actually looked that much into the underlying technology. So we were focused more on like the fact that you can change policies over time using existing TE. But yeah, it's certainly something to look into. I can imagine that if you create policies around your key that bold change, and you could potentially use a stateless scene to that. But yeah, I haven't learned this which. Yeah, get more context.
The point is, and can you just provide a little bit of background on like the different stateless T and the regular T?
Well, I'm not a super strong T expert, but the T is provided by the chip that has memory. There's a temporary memory. It does not persistent memory other than the super small where there is the prior key which is created by the chip provider. And so
Business stakeholders do this.
the T's are just the T's by themselves is just the stuff within the chip, and the keys in there add no persistent non-persistent memory. And so what like even 90% of people that today what with T's are doing, they are on Amazon, on Nitro T's, and they are using stateful T's, so they read from a file system which is EBS in the Elastic Clock storage. Which is encrypted symmetrically, so asymmetric encryption. And the key isn't stored in a KMS, which is AWS KMS, which is like a redundant system. And so, in a sense, all the T's or AWS are based on custodial in your And also, if the policies don't change, even just shutting down the computer, you're like you have key debugging because you can reboot it. So it's not just about changing, even make it permanent. It's about recovery, and the key will be lost if you shut. Yes, and so a way to attack threat would be to just have the mandate to switch the machine off. If you're not trusting Bezos, but you're doing that at all, you are trusting a person that runs it. So if you're doing your hardware, you're not scalable proposing this to your upper party because. So the only solution is a stateless approach, which has its own charges. But the only solution that I've seen to people, so to people actually, but the only solution that I've seen to this is multi-party computation to recreate the key after the T is removed. Mirror is working on this approach of Faraday and torture. So basically, when you reboot the T,
the NV computes flow. Yes, you can send while you reboot the T, the only thing that never changes and it's stateful is the private and public key written on the CDPR, right? And so with this public key, with the private key, you sign a signature that is, I'm really this T, I promise. You send this signature statement to a network of nodes, like a multi-path execution network. They all together recreate that same magic key that is the one for reading a file system. They send the key back to the T, signing that with the public key of the T so nobody can read. Finally, the T is back aware of his own key and can reread the standard access to his own parasystem. But after that, you don't have to maintain just MPC. Yeah, which is terrible. And you need to plus the nodes of MPC area. That's good, bro. And if one of them decides to not show up, well, you preset it. So it's a key on that. Okay, man. Okay. But still, you can run a tag because if you are pre-K, you're refresh. It's to make sense. So there's some instrument in the generations. Yes, do. Exact. And at the end of a key generation, you arrive always to the same key, which is the symmetry key to encrypt and decrypt file system should always be the same, right? It's, yes, SBC key. Yeah, I'm not coming about CE, but like it is proven that I cannot like hide that the hardware to get the private or no. Like first of all, you're doing like the process of signing, for example, one cannot hear or
Yeah, it is a side attack based on the
reading the electromagnetic but it's certified. I would say that there is actually, if you manage to read the target key, you can do that, but then you can't use the T anymore because you have destroyed the chip. So it's maybe actually the key. Actually, maybe access storage device. Yes, but you would have access to private key of the smartphone that you start. There's the umbrella key of the T, which is not enough design on shape. So you in that, but doing that, you have destroyed the T. So it's like once, right? As soon as you are able to read the essay, you have changed. But like I cannot like so I saw like hide directly the direct key of the address or content various because the T still needs to like sign, so it needs to use the classic key somehow. So in the other question, it's to see about the KTE. So like it was very like pro. What it was like the many cited to data sheets. So it needs to be the private key somehow inside system. Can one like type minorities? The private key is stored in the encrypted file system in the same scenario. For you to access it, we did the symmetric key of the file system, which was supposed like this. Okay, so like this is the signature process also encrypted the whole process, all the file system. So if a key is just in the T and it's not stateful, the problem is that it will be the key, the T usabilities. If it's in the external storage, the point is what is the symmetric key. The only usual that's in the market kept up to now it is NPC. Thank you, big. Good job. Oh yeah.
Before that, one more question, and then I want to ask something about applications.
Okay, go first. Yeah, my question is actually about applications. Okay, perfect. Great people think alike then. So yeah, I think they use smart constructs and use source to policies and stuff like UTCs or enforce like final or FSC schedules on tokens. So there's potential for conventional liquefaction rates and these access policies to like mitigate or make some liquefaction efficient and strongest. And or
Yeah, so I will say that like for multi-sig, for example, our pro-social application to that is you use the liquefaction to enrich the access structure of the multi-sig. So like for example, rather than just requiring a key, it would be like a key plus some other access mechanism that could usually strengthen the security of the whole licensing. And then mostly
you run generate here it's about application. So liquefaction combined with Rebel say.
Oh yeah. So I mean certainly we can use it to enrich existing access structures and so yeah, we hope to see more of it to enhance security or enhance, the ecosystem.
Versus in your in them. That use a smart contract like to also do checkpointing, or it explain the how the robbery for the account in that case also.
Okay, so you're referring to the liveness section of Paper, which explains how we say recover keys in case the T-based blockchain goes down. And the way that would work is we had a smart contract on Ethereum that we basically challenged the T blockchain for availability by submitting the challenge on the Ethereum smart contracts, and there's some policy on the T-based blockchain which will say, okay, if there's been any challenge on Ethereum, I will sign a transaction that will basically report to the contract that it's sold at. And if there was some challenge that doesn't get a valid response in a certain amount of time, maybe a couple of days or something, and then suddenly the T-based blockchain, which should have been basically save an encrypted copy of the key somewhere, there'll be some backup chain that can decrypt those after that's been set on a very solidifying chain you mentioned. Well, yeah, so there would have to be some other cheap, maybe TE committee or NTC or something, that once it notices that the Ethereum flag has been switched, saying, okay, the TE blockchain is then offline, we need to go recover it, but then that backup session should then be able to decrypt the backup state. That seems because there is no whole number. There would have to be some separate committee from here to do that. Yeah.
I think maybe just one or two more points from anybody that haven't spoken, or you have questions.
Yeah, feel free to ask. I love questions too.
Yeah. Maybe just with any docs.
I had one thought related to access control.
I know that Sui or Mission has been working on this thing called CK login, where you can log in with social credentials and stuff like that. Facebook, whatever, provides, I think, OpenID connects. Have you looked into that at all? It's a alternative access control policy where you log in with Google, and a lot of that would be your unlock for sending a transaction.
So we have looked into it particularly, but I'm sure you could write a policy that enables that. Andrew Miller has actually looked into Web 2 in Humrins, in Humrins of social media accounts, Twitter accounts, and they're looking at TikTok. The problem with those is the company can still you just call customer service, they could reset the account. Whereas with blockchain, it's a little more interesting because you have really strong guarantees, in the future what the key could do and what it has access to. In fact, that no one can take your assets as kind of or part of blockchains.
Got it. So mixing the Web 2 and the Web 3, access control might be sort of counterproductive.
So might be because the company that you're working with can kind of change the rules at any time.
Right. It's not just the D that enforces it, it's also
it's also the company which could preset the account for revoke its access.
Yep.
Maybe one last point. What are you kind of looking forward to?
What is the next evolution with, and where do you think this will go?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out all the properties that you need to create the liquefaction system. Because we're looking at potentially increasing the security, because for a lot of people it's hard to stomach trusting a T for all your assets or something. So we're trying to construct even a matrix of what tools we can use to create a better liquefaction system, and then how we could apply this to, for example, the decentralized centralization that it could use to trade assets across chains without really needing to worry about the centralized exchange like rugging you or trading your assets when they should just be on a chain somewhere. So it's more trustworthy chain these days.
Got another quick question if I may. Not on the application side, but if you could you replace like the TE with any combination of like other cryptographic primitives? Is that in a practicable?
So the T is the easiest to do by far and the cheapest, but you could probably do it with MVC committee. Okay, you could do it with a committee of T's, but then if one of them gets broken, then piracy's compromised.
Right.
And we're also kind of exploring different constructions that can give us better securities.
Yeah, I guess the access control logic is probably still the most like extensive to UAC.
Yeah.
But so you would have done the same privacy assumptions we would have to see because the single node will set stuff. Unless you must have HCI on C, which is
Very good. So yeah, it really depends on the policies, really policies specific when it comes to that thing.
Isn't MVC just a view over private states or no individuals? Yeah.
Yeah, I think he might be referring to some other, like, it depends on also like maybe reading the state on what the policy enables and if the state's large enough, like you have a lot of Ethereum like stating that you actually want your policy to read, it might require terabyte geeks and integration.
Right, guys. I know we started this a little bit late, but just want to shout out to James for honestly like talking about liquefaction for like 3 hours today.
He said, all right, well, good deal. Thank you, sir. Yeah, and if there's any like questions or thoughts, I'm sure feel free to talk to me. Whatever. Yo, dude, thank you so much, man. Thank you.